Good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, I have to say I'm not a professor. I'm just, junior lecturer. That Dr. Prapat gave me a big task to, moderate this session. Again, speaking in the afternoon, especially after lunch, is very difficult. So please bear with us and try to, find your questions after the session end. This session number 2, is on the topic of emerging regional political security landscape. So from this morning session, we look at the global level, and then we try to narrow down into the regional political security landscape. Before I start this session, I'd like to introduce our panelists. First, on your left hand, on my right hand side, I would like to introduce Professor Muhadi Sugiono from Gadjah Mada or Universitas Gadjah Mada, UGM. Professor Muhadi Sugiono is a senior lecturer at the Department of International Relations, and he is currently the director of Center for Southeast Asian Social Studies at University of Gadjah Mada. He also served as a member of advisory board of the Asia Pacific Center for the Responsibility to Protect the University of Queensland, Brisbane, and he is the author of the book, Gramscian Critique of Developments. And his article on peace, security, and international relations appear in journals and book chapters. Please welcome Professor Sugiono. Here he comes. Okay. So next, on your right-hand side, my left-hand side, I'd like to introduce Dr. Term Sak, not Germ Sak, different person. Term Sak, okay? Term Sak, much thinner, okay? Chalerm Palanupap is a visiting research fellow at ASEAN Study Center of the Institute of Southeast Asian Studies, ISIS, in Singapore. Different ISIS, okay? Before joining the ASEAN Study Center in late 2012, Mr. Term Sak had served nearly 20 years at the ASEAN Secretariat in Jakarta, where his last post was Director of Political and Security Cooperation under the ASEAN Political and Security Community, APSC. So you see the real person who drafted that charter, okay? The blueprint. Prior to joining the ASEAN Secretariat, Mr. Term Sak had worked at The Nation, Thailand's bestseller newspapers, off and on since October 1972 in various positions. So now, Mr. Term Sak, or Dr. Term Sak, gained his PhD degree from University of New Orleans, Department of Political Science in 1982 and 1986 respectively. So please welcome Dr. Term Sak Chalerm Palanupap krab. Last but not least, I'd like to welcome Professor Panithan Wattanayakon. He is now Associate Professor in Department of International Relations, Faculty of Political Science, Chulalongkorn University. He's very well known, and you'll see he always appears on TV now. He joined the faculty in 1993 and has been teaching classes on international relations. And also, Dr. Panithan served as a member of Chulalongkorn University's Committee on Global and Regional Studies Network and a member of Academic Committee of King's Prachatipok's Institute. He is also a member of ASEAN Regional Forum Experts and Eminence. Currently, Dr. Panithan is working on a research project focusing on the border management between Thailand and Cambodia. The project is supported by Thailand Research Fund. Please welcome Dr. Panithan Wattanayakon krab. So in this afternoon session, what we are going to do is to analyze regional political security landscape affecting ASEAN and what should be ASEAN strategies to promote its emerging role as a regional player. And this session could cover, analyze, and following topics. We have a lot of things to say: ADMM, regional political actor, regional priority role of major powers in the region. So I won't waste your time. I'd like to start with Professor Sugiono. Please welcome Professor Sugiono again. Thank you. Sorry, you have just only 15 minutes. No, not over 15 minutes. Okay. If you speak more than 15 minutes, I'll give you the sign.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay. Thank you, the chairperson. First of all, I would like to join the previous speaker in thanking the Thammasat University Center for ASEAN Studies for inviting me here to give me an opportunity to express my ideas about what's going on in the region. So what I would like to talk about, I have written a short paper which is distributed in your table with the title Thinking Security, an Asian Way. And what I mean by that is the ASEAN way of thinking security. Now, the rise of tension in the region has put ASEAN in the spotlight. Amidst growing tension in the, for example, South China Sea, and the growing rivalry and competition between China and the US, for example, led many to look at ASEAN, either to criticize ASEAN for the lack of capacity or the lack of power to contribute to the solution of the problem, or to look at ASEAN with an expectation that ASEAN should do something. And one of the themes in the conference is exactly talking about what ASEAN can do. Now, this led me to a very simple question. Does ASEAN really have the capacity, as many expected ASEAN to have, with relations to the current situation in the wider context of East Asia? Before I express my idea on that issue, I will divide my presentation in 3 parts. The first part is to look at how ASEAN actually think about security, what the concept of security, what ideas of security influence ASEAN. And then what ASEAN has achieved in terms of security, using this way of thinking of security. And finally, the third part of the presentation will answer the question, is it possible to project what ASEAN, is it possible to project ASEAN security thinking into wider context of security, that is regional security? What is the prospect or limitation? Now, let me go directly to the way of thinking security in Southeast Asia. In the paper, you will look at, you will see the longer version explaining about the theoretical concept which undoubtedly influenced Southeast Asian when it comes to the term of security. But it is quite fair to say that Southeast Asian countries are very pragmatic in terms of the ideas underlying their policy toward peace and security. What I mean by that is that no single idea has influenced Southeast Asian countries in formulating their view on security. Different discourses of security can be found in Southeast Asia since 1960s, as most of the Southeast Asian countries gained their independence. The very obvious manifestation of the security thinking in Southeast Asia was the establishment of ASEAN, of course. It is the initial step toward the institutionalization, institution building and norm in Southeast Asia through the establishment of regional organization. The story began very early, beginning with an unsuccessful effort, but finally became successful with the establishment of ASEAN in 1967. What is interesting, the underlying idea of the establishment of ASEAN is basically a realist notion of power politics and the conception of security. As the Bangkok Declaration in 1967 clearly shows, security concerns driving the 5 founding countries to establish ASEAN emerged from their perceived threat, coming from both security environment, that is, from within as well as from outside the region. Most of the founding countries of ASEAN were newly independent countries. They were very concerned with their sovereignty and political independence, which they saw as being threatened by superpowers competition using every corner of the world, including Southeast Asia, as their competition field and by hostile relations with their own neighboring countries. Those two security environments led those countries to see other countries as the source of threats to their security, or more precisely, their existence as independent states. ASEAN is considered as a strategic and collective response of these countries, united by shared non-communist ideological orientation. The adoption of Zone of Peace, Freedom and Neutrality, ZOPFANT, and Treaty of Amity and Cooperation, TAC, in 1970s was a further indication of the dominance of the traditional conception of security among ASEAN member countries. Both ZOPFANT and TAC were intended to eliminate such external potential threat by fencing ASEAN from external interference. ZOPFANT was basically a demand, especially directed to the powerful extra-regional powers, such as US, China, and at the time, Soviet Union, to leave Southeast Asia countries alone. While TAC was designed more broadly, in the sense that ASEAN countries demand that all states, both intra and extra-regional, hold the principle of non-interference and respect for the state sovereignty in their relations with others. In both cases, the state and the state sovereignty was clearly the main reference of the security. So this is the power politic dimension of security in ASEAN. ASEAN did make change, or more appropriately we can say is modification in the strategy for pursuing or promoting security and peace in the region following the end of Cold War, which for many was seen as signifying the dramatic change in the discourse of security. This time, ASEAN moved from a very realist point of view to more liberal prescription of security. ASEAN adopted more cooperative rather than a confrontational approach to security. As communism was no more seen as a major threat to the region, ASEAN began to invite communist countries to participate in the peace and security building in the region, in Southeast Asia. As such, ASEAN was changing in its conception of peace and security from basically negative conception of security into more positive. Instead of framing security in terms of the security from, being secured from, ASEAN began to define security in terms of security with others. So the inclusion of the former communist countries indicate that ASEAN would like to work with them in order to achieve and promote security. The change of approach was manifested into important decisions. The first is ASEAN opened its membership to communist countries in the region. And the second manifestation is ASEAN also built multilateral framework which bring together countries outside the region into dialogues concerning peace and security issues in Southeast Asia. The former resulted in the expansion of membership to include all 10 countries in Southeast Asia, of course before the independence of East Timor. The latter led to the establishment of ASEAN Regional Forum and various other multilateral forums such as ARF, and then ASEAN Plus 3, East ASEAN Summit, and ASEAN Defense Minister Meeting. ARF, excuse me. As a multilateral forum, ARF is meant to serve as an institutional framework to talk about political and security challenges facing the region, bringing together all ASEAN member countries and all ASEAN dialogue partners. It constitutes a single security-oriented platform of ASEAN and other major powers in East Asia. ASEAN also initiated to establish East Asian Summit in 2005. Supposed to overcome the limitation of ARF, EAS is conceived as institutional framework to discuss security problems in Asia at the highest political level. And also, it is quite interesting to see that apart from expanding the fora to include so many participants, so many powers as possible, ASEAN multilateral forum is also signified by the expansion of the agenda to discuss in the multilateral forum. The establishment of ASEAN +3, for example, is other important component in the ASEAN way of thinking security. Inspired by the idea of functionalism, ASEAN +3 is aimed at promoting security through a wide range of cooperation with ASEAN major neighboring countries like China, Japan, and South Korea. Functionalism idea is basically we are talking about security without mentioning security. We promote security without mentioning the word security. We are talking about promoting security by doing cooperation in other areas. Now, this is the way in which ASEAN thinks about security. Now, what ASEAN has achieved? Many criticize ASEAN and ASEAN initiative as ineffective. ARF, for example, is criticized as simply wasting talking shop with no significant consequence for regional security. But it is, of course, unfair to characterize all the initiative of Southeast Asian countries for peace and security as simply useless. At least, we can cite one important contribution that IARF has made. Southeast Asian countries have successfully prevented themselves from being trapped into power politics played by major powers in the region, at least within the Southeast Asian region. Moreover, they have successfully brought all major powers to dialogues in the term that Southeast Asian countries have set. The adoption of TAC by all major powers, including most recently by the US, also clearly reflects the very success of the Southeast Asian countries in managing peace and security in the region within ASEAN term. It is, however, becoming very problematic when we would like to project the very success of ASEAN into much wider context of region. This is at least for two reasons. That, of course, we can find many other reasons, but I would like to focus on two possible reasons why it is not possible to project ASEAN way of thinking security into much wider context. First, in the much wider context in East Asia, power politics remains the rule rather than exception. While Cold War has been over, its legacy remains strong in East Asia, especially as indicated by the hostile relations between North Korea and the US, as well as South Korea and North Korea. In addition, rivalry and competition remain the most dominant character of the relations within the region, especially in relation with China, with South China Sea disputes, and with the rise of China and the response of the US to the rise of China, will result in intensified competition and rivalry between the two big powers. In such a context of power politics, size does matter. The fact that ASEAN consists of countries with a smaller power simply indicates that it is a real limitation for ASEAN to influence the regional security landscape. It is simply impossible for ASEAN to play much more role with regard to the wider context of East Asia. And the second serious problem that facing ASEAN is related to the cohesion. The main source of success of ASEAN to promote peace and security in Southeast Asia tend to be eroded in the wider context of power politics in East Asia. While the very success of ASEAN to maintain peace and security in the sub-region in Southeast Asia, but the increased tension in Southeast Asia, in Asia now, tend to erode the very basic, the very essence which bring ASEAN success to maintain peace and security in Southeast Asia. Ironically, this occurs and ASEAN community is approaching in 2015. As indicated by, for example, the failure of ASEAN Summit to issue a joint statement in the ASEAN Summit in Phnom Penh in Cambodia in 2012. So this is for the very first time ASEAN Summit failed to issue a statement. Of course, this make it very difficult for ASEAN to play greater role in the wider context of East Asia. But despite of all those limitations, ASEAN way of thinking security has taught us one important lesson. In contrast to what realists believe that a more powerful security order in East Asia cannot be built upon the foundation of power politics. So the lesson that wider context of the landscape of East Asia can learn from Southeast Asia is that it is important not to build the landscape of security, of regional security, upon the power politics, either through balance of power or through preponderance of power or through concert of power. As such, I believe that the presence of the United States military can probably be more obstacle than prerequisite for peace and security in Asia. It is rather counterproductive to be the promotion to promote the peace and security in East Asia. Undoubtedly, this statement can be debated. Of course, we can debate about that. But as the experience of the Southeast Asian countries suggests, unless we move away from the realist understanding of peace and security, such possibility is simply unthinkable. In other words, building peace and security in Asia requires a willingness of the East Asian countries to accept their agency capacity to deliberately govern their own interstate relations rather than rely on outside power. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Professor Sugiano gave quite, the stories that make me think of another story. I may tell you this story. When we come to the topic of the security of ASEAN, it was the very big issue when you talk about the relation between each countries. From your second point, this is a make-up story, Professor. Okay, to refresh up your feeling sleeping. It was in 1998. It was in 1998. It was a make-up story. Don't take it real. When it were 10 countries, members of ASEAN, assembled together in Bali, but it was bombed. That's why they need to evacuate from Bali to Jakarta. But there were not just only 10 countries, but also there were +3, +4, including China and America. And then they need to be evacuated in two, just only one, single helicopter. And when the helicopter, flew from in the middle, between Bali and Jakarta, and the captain, the pilot, he announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to tell you, the machine of the plane is broken. So please sacrifice 3 of your leaders to sustain the prosperity of ASEAN." What they say. Who was the first country rise up or stand up? China, because China is the major power in this ASEAN, because he is the big brother, right? And he said, "We are China," okay? And he stood up and stand in the middle of the door of the helicopter. He said, "For President Mao Zedong." And then he jumped down, and he died. And the next country should be America, because America, he could not stand, she could not stand that China could, make something good for ASEAN. Americans stood up and say, "For equality, democracy, liberty, something, And then he jumped down and died. And you know who is the last country? Thailand, for sure. We are a great country. And we stood up and we say, for Priya here, and then he kicked Cambodian. So we can sustain prosperity of ASEAN now. So this is a story that could signify all the story that Professor Sugiyano tell us, that security is the security of the states, not security of other things. That's why we come to the core concept of the ASEAN political security by Dr. เติมศักดิ์เฉลิมพลานุภาพ Please welcome Dr. เติมศักดิ์ครับ
Thank you for you to have to switch on. Okay, the stock is not running yet. Well, I thank Dr. Papat and Thammasat Center for ASEAN Study for inviting me, but I should like to point out that I cannot speak for my ASEAN Study Center in Singapore. Neither can I speak for Singapore. I'm just a foreign worker in Singapore. But I should like to speak from a perspective of an ASEAN citizen. Although in ASEAN we do not yet recognize ASEAN citizenship just yet. But I'm glad to see a room full of government officials. I think this is a good sign that Thai government is paying attention to ASEAN. I think this is something will be important, will be useful. And just last week, I read the news that Socha already set up a center for the facilitation of Thailand preparedness at the emergence of the ASEAN community. I think this is also good news. At least the Thai military want to do everything useful. Well, I have my presentation in PowerPoint, so I have to draw your attention to my PowerPoint. It's not easy to write paper nowadays. Too many seminars to attend to write paper so many times. But with our PowerPoint, I think it's easier to let the audience follow what I'm saying. Well, let me start. Well, if you have any comments or suggestions, you can always contact me at my email shown in the PowerPoint. The importance of Southeast Asia, I think we are a unique region where all the major powers claim to have some strategic interest. And this is quite a unique situation. This morning, Dr. Sulin mentioned our ASEAN diversity. I gave you some number here. I think you can look at it in your leisure time. He mentioned also the limitation, the limit, 25% of our intra-ASEAN trade. That may be structural because we have to import a lot of petroleum products from the Middle East. We also still have to rely on capital goods, high-tech equipment, and arms from outside the ASEAN region, and that's why our intra-ASEAN trade is quite small, 25%. But 25% is still the largest that we are trading among ourselves. In terms of FDI, we are also the largest investor in our own region. In terms of tourism, we also rely on ourselves, so that's good news. Diversity in ASEAN. Well, I should like to point out that ASEAN seems to be the only regional organization with very diverse political system in our membership. Nowhere else outside the UN system that you will find two communist countries in our organization. So that is quite a unique situation. But because in ASEAN, we don't impose any political criteria of membership. Age of globalization, we heard about the rise of nationalism. Also, very important sign of globalization is the increasing high degree of economic interdependence. I think that's also an important factor to look into. Now, I should like to draw your attention to a comparison between Southeast Asia and Northeast Asia. What are the similarities? Well, three key players, China, US, Japan, are key players in both sub-regions. Well, in both sub-regions, China has the advantage because of geography, and some would even say because of growing wealth, and also China has the advantage of time, at least in political continuity of the Communist Party ruling of China. I think that's a big advantage. When you compare with USA, for example, we don't even know what will happen after the administration of Obama is replaced. Will the US rebalancing to Asia continue? We don't even know. In both sub-regions, Russia is a secondary player, but still trying to do some activity. What we can also see, there are many dissimilarities, and I like to point out that in Southeast Asia, one big difference is we have ASEAN. If you look at Northeast Asia, what do they have? Not much of regional cooperation over there. They have the Shanghai Cooperation, but that doesn't include Japan or South Korea. In Southeast Asia, we have nuclear weapon-free zone, but the Korean Peninsula denuclearization is still a big strategic problem over there, and they have the wild card in North Korea. Whereas in Southeast Asia, we do not have to suffer the nightmare of a MAD, mutually assured destruction scenario. And in Southeast Asia, there is still no permanent US base anymore, only rotational deployment facilities. But in Northeast Asia, you will find US bases in South Korea, in Japan. So that's one big difference between the two regions. Some more difference. US commitment to Southeast Asia less than what the US is committed to defending South Korea and Japan. A lot of people forgot about the UK role in our Southeast Asian region, but they still have an active five-power defense arrangement. And even fewer people realize that there is actually one battalion of British infantrymen stationed in Brunei, Darussalam. So UK still have some security role in Southeast Asia. India, the new government doesn't seem to be paying attention much beyond South India. I think the priority for the new Indian government is to improve relations with India's neighbors. So, but I was told that India's Look East policy will continue with more Act East action. Well, India is building a highway to Myanmar into Mysore of Thailand, so that is continuing. India still want to engage Southeast Asia, but India is also competing with China in that aspect. I'm running out of time already. Oh, another point to share with you that in ASEAN there is no permanent leader. That's very important fact to remember. If you want to look for a leader in ASEAN, you have to look into specific areas of cooperation. In trade, for example, Indonesia certainly is not a leader. Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand are leaders in promoting free trade in ASEAN. In environment, Indonesia certainly not a leader. So you have to look into different areas. And our national position also differ when you come down to individual nation state. You can find some of us being pro-US, some of us being pro-China, and Thailand certainly want to be known as pro-everyone. So what is our position when we come together as a group in ASEAN? This is what I'd like to present to you. I should say the answer is we cannot choose to be pro-US of A or pro-China. As a group in ASEAN, I think we have to look into our own strategic interest, and that is in the concept of ASEAN centrality. As a group, at the end of my PowerPoint, I emphasize that ASEAN wants and will remain constructively neutral. We don't want to take sides in the power rivalry. You cannot depend on either one of them, I should say. Better depend on ourselves collectively. At least we can decide together what we want to do among ourselves. So that is my proposed solution. ASEAN centrality, there are two dimensions. In the narrow sense, it means ASEAN should provide proactive leadership in all the initiatives that ASEAN has put forth. ASEAN has engagement with +1 dialogue partners, +3 ASEAN Regional Forum, ARF, ASEAN Defense Minister Meeting Plus, and now East Asia Summit. We have initiated this process for engagement, and at this point, I should like to respond to what Muhadi mentioned about the ASEAN way. Well, you can also look at the ASEAN way from the perspective of we are peace-oriented. We want peace. We promote dialogue and cooperation for goodwill, for mutual benefit, for common interest. We operate by consultation and consensus. I think these are norms that have been accepted by our partner. But when we talk about ASEAN centrality, there is also the broader perspective of ASEAN centrality, which means we have to increase, to add new political, economic, social, diplomatic weights to our ASEAN community, to what we are building in ASEAN. It's a law of physics. If you increase the mass, you will have more gravitational pull. If we want to be the center of dialogue and cooperation, we ourselves in ASEAN must be seen as cohesive, growing, prosperous, and then constructively diplomatic. This is what I mean, the broader perspective of ASEAN centrality. We must implement what we have agreed. Dr. Surin mentioned about the ASEAN Charter. Certainly, that's a very important institutional framework for us to operate. But it's very important to add new weight into ASEAN. And that's why now, at the approach of the 2015, well, 2015, I should like to emphasize, is not the end of community building in ASEAN. It's just a milestone. It's just the end of the first roadmap from 2009 to 2015. But beyond that, ASEAN community building will have to continue. And that's why a group of senior officials has been formed to look into new ideas, to identify new, more ambitious, concrete goals for ASEAN community, for all the 3 community pillars beyond 2015. So that's ongoing. At the same time, there is another high-level task force set up to look into all the ASEAN mechanism, ASEAN Secretariat, and also ASEAN external relations to see what can be done to improve them. From Thailand, the representative is Deputy Permanent Secretary Manaswi, who spoke this morning here, he represents Thailand to look into how to improve ASEAN mechanism. The problem with this exercise is that whatever we want to do, it will require more resources. And when you talk about money in ASEAN, we always disagree on where to find the money. But we always agree that we can rely on our external friends and partners, ask for external help first. But this is an old mindset that has to change. If we are building an important, concrete, organic ASEAN community for the future of our 620 million and counting population, I think it's time that we have to start looking into how we are going to pay for community building, how to mobilize our own resources. That's an important question. So actually, I want to answer the question raised as a theme of this seminar. ASEAN certainly is not yet capable of playing any meaningful, important role in the global level. But by the year 2022, ASEAN has a commitment to create what is called an ASEAN common platform on all major global issues. So 2022, you have to mark that year down. By that time, we hope that we'll be able to formulate more common position on all important global issues. But from now, I should say that ASEAN certainly is the most important regional player in Southeast Asia. I think that is no question about that. In our own Southeast Asian region, we are the premier regional player, and it should be so because this is our region. This is where we stay, and this is where we should be able to work together for our common benefit. Well, I'm glad I'm staying within the 15 minutes. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Dr. Termsak. So you mentioned a lot about the, superpowers and the ASEAN countries, which country that we take side. And I think there are lots of issues. And the last point was very important because when we talk about ASEAN in the year 2015, some people might say, yeah, it is the end of the process. But some scholars said, it is the delivery day. So now we are pregnant, right? And then we give birth. We give birth in 2015, and then we have to raise baby again until it, So it was started 1967 when mother and father, start to do something. So we spent about 47 years to be pregnant, okay? Then I pass on this to Professor Panithan. I think he gave us a insightful and very, very informative ideas of how Thailand look at the ASEAN political and security approach. Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you, Ajahn Akarapong. I would like to also extend my gratitude to Ajahn Prapat Thepchatri and his staff at the Center for ASEAN Studies at Thammasat to invite me to be here. Contrary to your belief, Thammasat and Chula are not only rivals, we are also friendly in terms of academic cooperation. So I'm glad to be here. I think what I'm trying to do here is trying to perhaps give my thinking and perhaps get your also thinking on what is the emerging regional political security landscape in the next few years in the region. A lot of issues have been touched upon already by Ajahn Termsak and Professor Muhadi. I'm not going to repeat on those, but
I think in thinking about this emerging security landscape or political landscape, I think we need to look at maybe at least three main factors. First, they are competing four models of academics interpretation of the Asia-Pacific regional security order. The US-led or maybe in the longer term, China-led hegemony model. A lot of debates on this hegemony model. That's one. Second is, of course, you know, the strategic condominium, share power model, G2 or maybe G2 plus, by many other realist perspectives like Dr. Kissinger, Dr. Brzezinski, and others. So that's the second model. Third is a very interesting model, the old model that we are very familiar with international relations, balance of power model, you know, rise of China, alliances between China, Russia, US, India, Japan, and even Philippines and Vietnam may be already observed playing significant role in this kind of model. And last, of course, that Ajahn Kun Termsak and Professor Mu Hadi talked about is the institutionalism or multilateralism model. Of course, it began 5 years ago with the proposed of the more inclusive institutions by ASEAN and by many others, including Australia. You observe the decline in this model. So this is one factor that we need to be clear on what direction we are moving toward. The debates are still very much ongoing. It's up to you to believe which model we are heading into. I have my own preferences. But before we go into that, the second point is, of course, what kind of recent developments giving weight to which model? Number one factor is US pivot model or now rebalancing strategy model. Second, China rise, and third, ASEAN decline. These are the three factors maybe contributing to the recent strategic developments in the region. The US rebalancing strategy or model is very clear, The United States want to be here. They want to maintain dominant in the region. She wants to lead in this new emerging Asia-Pacific regional security order. She wants to lead. She has a commitment to lead. United States already spent 66% of its budget in Asia-Pacific, according to the IISS estimates last year. That's number one in the region, compared to number two, China spent already and only 12% of the budget in Asia-Pacific, according to the IISS 2013. Japan is number three. So it's very clear that the US has the ability, capability, and willingness to lead. The 5 key pillars already announced by the National Security Advisor a few years ago, so 5 key pillars to strengthening the alliances, to deepening the partnerships, emerging partnerships, to rebuilding the stable relationship with China, to empowering the regional institutions, and to helping to build a substantial economic architect, which we will hear more tomorrow. It's very clear that the US is moving into that. It's already claimed that it is already a resident Pacific power. It's not going anywhere. It has been here since the beginning. It's just going to put more pivot into the regions. Call it what you like, rebalancing, coexisting, even, the China call it peaceful rise and coexisting. So, but this priority is very clear. But the problem is, can it do it? Can the United States do it enough to create stability? The crisis in the Middle East are now re-emerging. The plan to cut $500 billion US dollars in the defense budget in the next 10 years would allow the US to do the 2 simultaneous problems in the Middle East and in Asia Pacific at the same time. The commitment of the United States administration, the the public opinion would allow the U.S. to do that. These are the issues that we are still very much question the U.S. Validity on this model. But it's very clear that the desire is very clear. It's there, and the capability is clear. Second, recent developments on China. I'm sure there are experts on China in this room. I'm not an expert. But from what I see, yes, China is also willing to be more assertive in the region. Private talks, public talks, relationships with many countries in military terms, in political terms, on top of the economic terms, is willing to play the role. And it also has a capability. She has a capability to support some of her assertiveness. And the conflict between the US and the PRC in many areas is alarming. In cyber warfare, for example, in maritime build-up, for example, the Japanese security experts are quite worried about the assertiveness of the Chinese maritime forces, in South China Sea with the capable missiles, ships and others. The Philippines and the Vietnamese, they know very well how assertive the Chinese Navy has been in the last few years. So these are the conflicts associated with the China rise. Although China insisted that, and we still believe that this is still a peaceful rise, still years, if not 20 to 30 years before China can catch up with the United States. So that is, of course, the factor on the recent development that may give you more weight toward those four models. Last, of course, ASEAN problems. For the last 5 years, I'm not so sure you see two trends conflicting each other or not. One trend, the input into regional, multilateral, already crowded, institutional, regional landscape on the rise, and it's nowhere to stop it. You look at the EAS, ADMM Plus, and many other on top of those, regional groupings. More coming, no doubt. But on the other hand, the output has been quite disappointingly less. Maritime disputes, for example, in the region, Thailand as part of the coordinator, Cambodia as part of the share last year created a Cambodian incident, has not helped to raise the output of these ASEAN capabilities. I'm not so sure what kind of formulas or pills Kun Termsak can inject into the ASEAN problems or the decline, to me, of ASEAN leadership. It may do to some of the roles in certain countries like Thailand and others in ASEAN. So the 30% accomplishment, I'm not so sure, is improved significantly. According to Dr. Surin Pitsuwan years ago, I'm sure when you look at the current output of these institutionalism or multilateralisms, it's quite worrisome when you calculate how much money we spend, the public money, into at least 3 big meetings a day per year. The public may be very much shocked on how much money we invested, billions of US dollars, into the very interesting handshaking, very interesting song, writing song, singing, exotic places, churches, and many other exotic locations. The public will be very much struck by this kind of the high budget, and low outcome of ASEAN. I'm trying to be critical, as many academics trying to be on ASEAN, but yet every time ASEAN come back, survive and alive, and yet the second to European nation as the in terms of institution capable of doing things. So that's the complexities of ASEAN. Every time when we say ASEAN is on the deathbed, ASEAN rose up and say we are not, every time. So this is a very paradoxical in these recent developments in terms of the weights giving to those models. Now, last point that I would like to make from this observation of 4 models and recent developments, I think we are heading into a more dynamic landscape with maybe 3 or 4 different characteristics. I would say in my particular thinking in the last 2-3 years, I think we are moving towards more dynamic balance of power landscape for the time being. We could change into the institutionalism again, ASEAN revive. We could change into the maybe hegemony model if China rise up more faster, more stronger, or even the US come up with much more assertive. But at the moment, I think we are moving toward a more dynamic balance of powers, with the US still leading the way, but with more difficulties in terms of commitment, in terms of budget. But this more hammering pivot, that's what I will call it, hammering of the pivot, will be continue. The US will hammer this interest even more so. Take the case of Thailand. I think the Thai can feel that hammer, very well during this unusual, or not so unusual anymore, 13 coups, change. So that's one. I think second, People's Republic of China will be more visible in terms of capability, in terms of assertiveness. This going to create a more asserting behavior of China. The Chinese will insist and assert even more positions. It has done so already with Thailand and others in many key areas. In the military area, there's many good dissertations done on Thai-Chinese 10 years of military relations. It's already clear in the conclusion that Chinese will push more in this asserting. I think in between the middle powers, those countries, Japan, India, Russia, Australia, and South Korea, will do both hammering and asserting together with China and the US, making that landscape even more dynamic. You see those countries, the middle powers, by the way, they are the 5 biggest in the 15 largest economies in the world. They will do both hammering, asserting, aligning with the US and China at the same time to preserve their national interests. That will make the pictures even much more complicated, much more dynamic. And fourth, ASEAN will try to do more hedging with the decline in terms of output, but nevertheless in terms of structure, in terms of formal relationship, they will do more hedging, trying to avoid these complications and trying to look within, trying to create mechanism to prevent the incident like it did happen in Cambodia about South China Sea. And lastly, I have 15 seconds, very lucky me. Thailand will also already underway, the National Council of the Peace and Order already began to review our options and strategies and alternatives on what to do in this dynamic landscape, or what to do with more balancing acts, trying to re-evaluate our options during this difficult time in the next 10 months or so, or 12 months, when the US is hammering more, when the Chinese is asserting more, when the ASEAN is hedging more, we will do more balancing. We will readdress our relations in a new light, perhaps with the US, with China, and with ASEAN. Let's hope that the NCPO will do that much more when they are here. By the time the elected civilian government returns to Thailand, the new strategic policy of the Thai government or for Thailand will be in place to be able to absorb these more dynamic and ever-changing landscapes in the near future. To that end, I'm not so sure what models you have in mind, but nevertheless, we are heading into a much more interesting time in Asia. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pranithan. So I won't summarize anything at this stage. I would like to turn back to the audience. Would anyone like to raise questions or any suggestions, please? We still have about 8 minutes. Yes, please. Three, 2, 1. Okay, time's up. Then I would take it back to the panelists to just give the last words. I mean the summary or anything to give back to the audience that what should be the answer. I mean what should be the summary or anything toward the emerging of ASEAN political, in terms of regional, not global frameworks. Maybe you go back to the 4 models of Dr. Pranithan. It's quite very interesting, and then we can discuss more. Please start from Dr. Sugiyano.
I think the most dangerous development in Asia with regard to ASEAN is that the growing competition and growing power politics in wider context of East Asia create a very serious problem with the cohesion, which has been the essence of ASEAN so far. So instead of talking about the possible contribution of ASEAN, then ASEAN should deal with this issue first. Otherwise, we will be more and more irrelevant for the solution of the problem in the wider context.
Please,
Thank you. I think this morning, Kun Manasavi also mentioned a few problems that ASEAN should do more. Certainly, we should do more in disaster relief cooperation. We should do more in stopping the trafficking in persons. That is still a big problem. Certainly in Thailand, we are facing that problem. Migrant workers, also, we still need to improve protection for the migrant workers because we rely on them, especially in Thailand, in Singapore, in Malaysia. Climate change, that is still a big problem that nobody knows what to do to it. But it is affecting us. You can look at the color of the Chao Phraya River. Now it's black. It should not be black. It's the main river of Thailand, and yet we are looking at the consequence of climate change. We are also facing many common challenges to human security, contagious disease. Now, MERS, MERS from the Middle East, it will continue to be a problem, and this is one area that ASEAN can do more, can cooperate with everyone outside of our region for the benefit of the people. And that's why I answer the question that ASEAN can and is already the premier regional player in our region, but not yet a global player. But we can if we, first of all, build successful ASEAN community beyond 2015.
Yes, please, Dr. Pranithan.
Yes, in thinking about I think successful accomplishments of ASEAN, I think the lower level of conflicts issues are much more promising, but still, much more complicated also. But you observe the environmental issues, labor issues, like Professor Termsak mentioned. I think this is maybe perhaps the way to go if you don't want to unite ASEAN to be a main player in balancing the power in a higher level of conflict with the United States or China, which of course you cannot do it easily. Although ASEAN spend altogether combined number 4 next to Japan in terms of defense budget, but that doesn't mean that all 10 countries are unified to act single-handedly in terms of security issues. So I think going to the lower level in many more hand-on in the real, different issues in the non-traditional threat areas is to be a very good option at the time for the time being. Second, I think the increasing public participation, public pressure into pushing ASEAN to be more effective, to be less bureaucratic. As Professor Surin Pisuvan said, put human face into ASEAN. I think at the beginning, we don't see that as a promising, but now you see young generation of people being hooked up to ASEAN. I think that should do more good for ASEAN revival. And last, of course, at the end of the day, Thailand in particular and other countries, maybe in general, they need to really look into their own internal stability, security, development, and even democracy for many countries. By that way, ASEAN will become again an important player. You cannot do it without strengthening your own powers in your own home. So I think that's what we try to do here in Thailand. Yeah.
And thank you, all 3 panelists. And I think I have nothing to summarize because when we talk about, political and security landscape, it, has a lot of things to do. But yes, we want peace, but peace should be something not, silence, right? Because silence it's a death. So if, we complete and we can achieve these peaceful, security and political relations, and in this very good sense, it should lead to happy. And yes, for 3 pillars, AEC, in Thailand, we have this Gindi, good eating, right? AEC, good eating. APSC, good living, right? And ASCC, the cultural community, social cultural community, it should be happy. That is all what we want. Then thank you so much for this session, and please give big hands to our panelists. Thank you so much.